The cargo bay of the merchant vessel Stellar Wind hummed with the sound of loading equipment. Captain Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his forehead as he supervised the loading of medical supplies bound for the Outer Rim colonies. 3 years of running supplies to Frontier World had taught him to keep his head down and avoid trouble. The galaxy was a dangerous place for independent human traders. Captain Morrison, a melodic voice spoke behind him. Jake turned to see a tall, elegant figure approaching. She had pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the cargo bay's lights, silver hair that moved like liquid mercury, and eyes the color of deep space. Her clothing was clearly expensive, flowing robes embedded with what looked like actual stars. "That's me," Jake said, setting down his datapad. "You looking for passage somewhere?" The alien woman studied him with an expression that made Jake uncomfortable. It wasn't hostile exactly, but there was something calculating about it. "I am Princess Zaratil of the Valdorian Empire. I require immediate transport to the Kepler station." Jake had heard of the Valdorians. They controlled a significant portion of this sector and weren't known for their kindness toward other species. Most humans gave them a wide berth. "I'm sorry, Your Highness, but I'm already contracted to deliver these supplies to—" "You misunderstand," Zaratil interrupted, her voice taking on a colder tone. "This is not a request." She gestured, and Jake noticed for the first time that she wasn't alone. 3 Valdorian guards materialized from the shadows near the cargo bay entrance. They were tall, muscular, and armed with energy weapons that hummed with barely contained power. "Now hold on," Jake said, raising his hand slightly. "I don't want any trouble here. But I've got a contract. Your primitive human contracts mean nothing to the Valdorian Empire," Zaratil said, stepping closer. Her eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. "You will take me to Kepler Station, where you will face consequences that your simple human mind cannot comprehend." Jake felt his temper rising. He'd dealt with plenty of bullies in his time, alien and human alike. But something about the princess's tone, the casual way she dismissed his humanity, hit a nerve. "Listen here, princess," he said, his voice hardening. "I don't care what empire you're from. This is my ship, and I don't take orders from anyone who threatens me." Zaratil's expression shifted from cold authority to genuine surprise. Apparently, she wasn't used to being spoken to that way. "Do you have any idea who you are addressing, human?" "Yeah," Jake said, crossing his arms. "A spoiled princess who thinks she can push around anyone she wants." "Well, you picked the wrong human today." The guards moved forward, their weapons charging with an ominous whine. Zaratil held up a hand to stop them, her eyes never leaving Jake's face. "Fascinating," she murmured. "Most species cower when they learn of my identity. Tell me, human, what makes you think you can defy the Valdorian Empire?" "Because I'm not most species," Jake replied. "I'm human, and we don't cower." "Humans," Zaratil said the word like it left a bad taste in her mouth. "Your species is barely out of its caves. You have no empire, no great fleets, no ancient wisdom. You're nothing more than upstart primitives who somehow learned to build starships." Jake smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You know what, princess? You're absolutely right. We are young. We don't have ancient empires or 1,000-year-old traditions. But you know what we do have? Enlighten me," Zaratil said, though her tone suggested she wasn't particularly interested in his answer. "We have something your kind will never understand," Jake said. "We have the ability to adapt, to survive, to fight when we're cornered. Your people have been comfortable for so long, you've forgotten what desperation looks like." "You dare," one of the guards began, but Zaratil silenced him with a gesture. "Continue," she said to Jake, her voice dangerously quiet. "Every other species in this galaxy either bows down to you or runs away," Jake continued. "But not humans. When you threaten us, we don't calculate odds or consider the wisdom of resistance. We get angry, and angry humans are dangerous humans." Zaratil laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "One human against the might of the Valdorian Empire? You must be joking." "One human, maybe," Jake said, "but you're not dealing with one human. You're dealing with humanity. And we have something your empire lacks." "Which is?" "Friends," Jake said simply. He touched a control on his wrist communicator. Immediately, the cargo bay was filled with the sound of multiple ship engines powering up. Through the viewport, Zaratil could see dozens of ships of various sizes and configurations moving into formation around the stellar wind. "What is this?" she demanded. "The Independent Traders Association," Jake explained. "We look out for each other. Word travels fast when someone threatens one of our own. Those ships out there, they're crewed by humans from a dozen different colonies. Ex-military, frontier families, people who've learned to fight for what's theirs." The princess moved to the viewport, her expression unreadable as she watched more ships join the formation. "You would risk war for one insignificant cargo vessel?" "We're not the ones starting a war," Jake said. "You are. The moment you threatened me, you threatened all of us. That's how humans work. We're pack animals. Hurt one, you hurt all." Zaratil turned back to face him, and Jake was surprised to see something that might have been respect in her alien features. "Your species is either very brave or very foolish." "Maybe both," Jake admitted. "But that's what makes us human." The princess studied the growing fleet outside for several long moments. "You cannot possibly think that this ragtag collection of civilian vessels could stand against Valdorian warships." "You're right," Jake said. "In a straight fight, you'd probably win. But it wouldn't be a straight fight. We'd make you work for it. We'd hit your supply lines, your communication networks, your civilian shipping. We'd make it too expensive for you to maintain control." "Guerrilla warfare," Zaratil mused. "Primitive, but potentially effective." "Very effective," Jay corrected. "Ask the Zenthri Empire how their occupation of the Terran colonies worked out for them." Zaratil's eyes widened slightly. The Zenthri defeat at human hands was legendary throughout this sector. An ancient, powerful empire brought low by what they had dismissed as primitive mammals. "But here's the thing, Princess," Jay continued. "I don't want a war. I'm just a trader trying to make a living. So I'll make you a deal. You presume to negotiate with, I presume to offer you a way out of this that saves face for everyone." Jake interrupted. "You need passage to Kepler Station? Fine, I'll take you there. But as a passenger, not as someone who commandeer my ship. You pay standard rates, you follow ship's rules, and you treat my crew with respect. And if I refuse..." Jake gestured toward the viewport, where more ships continued to arrive. "Then we find out exactly how much the Valdorian Empire is willing to sacrifice for one princess's pride." Zaratil was quiet for a long time, her alien features betraying nothing of her thoughts. Finally, she spoke. "You are either the bravest or most foolish being I have ever encountered." "I get that a lot," Jake said with a slight grin. "Very well," the princess said finally. "I accept your terms. But understand this, human, this is not over. You have shown me something today that I did not expect to find among your species. I will not forget it. Good or bad?" Jake asked. "That remains to be seen," Zaratil replied. She gestured to her guards, who lowered their weapons with obvious reluctance. "I will transfer the appropriate funds to your account." As the princess and her guards withdrew to arrange quarters, Jake's first officer, Seraph Chun, approached him. "Think that was wise, Captain?" she asked quietly. Jake watched Zaratil disappear into the ship's corridors. "Probably not," he admitted. "But sometimes you have to draw a line. If we let them push us around once, they'll never stop. And if she decides to take revenge..." Jake looked out at the fleet of ships that had come to his aid. Farmers with armed transports, ex-military pilots and converted fighters, families who had risked everything to answer his call. Then she'll learn that threatening one human means threatening all of us. And that's a lesson that tends to stick. As the stellar wind prepared to depart for Kepler Station, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was just the beginning. Princess Zaratil had looked at him with something more than anger or annoyance. There had been curiosity there, and perhaps a hint of respect. In Jake's experience, that was often more dangerous than simple hostility. But he was human, and humans had never backed down from challenge. Whatever came next, he'd face it the way his species always had, with courage, cunning, and the unshakable knowledge that they were never truly alone. The stars outside the viewport seemed to twinkle with promise and threat in equal measure as the fleet dispersed and the stellar wind set course for an uncertain future. The journey to Kepler Station should have taken 3 days. On the first day, Princess Zaratil kept to her quarters, emerging only for meals in the ship's small dining area. Jake made sure to maintain a professional distance, but he couldn't help noticing how she observed everything, The crew's interactions, the ship's systems, even the way humans ate their food. She's studying us, Sarachan murmured to Jake as they watched the princess examine her meal with scientific curiosity. Like we're specimens in a lab. Let her look, Jake replied. Maybe she'll learn something. What Jake didn't expect was for Zaratil to approach him on the second day while he was running maintenance checks in the engine room. The confined space, suddenly, felt much smaller with her presence. Your propulsion system is remarkably efficient, she said without preamble. Not as advanced as Valdorian technology, but the maintenance requirements are far lower. Jake looked up from the conduit he was checking. We build things to last. Can't afford to have breakdowns when you're weeks from the nearest repair station. Practical, Zaratil mused. Most species focus on advancing technology for its own sake. Humans seem to prioritize functionality over elegance. Elegance doesn't keep you alive when your life support fails, Jake said, returning to his work. Besides, there's something beautiful about a machine that does exactly what it's supposed to do when it's supposed to do it. An interesting philosophy. The princess moved closer, her robes rustling softly. Tell me, Captain Morrison, how did your species develop faster-than-light travel? The technology seems crude, yet effective. Jake straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag. You really want to know? I find myself curious about human capabilities. We stole it, Jake said bluntly. Zaratil blinked in surprise. Stole it? Well, reverse-engineered might be the polite term, Jake explained. About 50 years ago, a hegemony scout ship crashed on Earth. The pilot died, but the ship was mostly intact. Our scientists spent 10 years taking it apart piece by piece, figuring out how it worked. And the hegemony allowed this. Jake laughed. They didn't know about it. The crash happened in a remote area. By the time they sent a recovery team, we'd already moved the wreckage. Told them the ship was completely destroyed. Remarkable, Zaratil said, though Jake couldn't tell if she was impressed or appalled. Most species would have contacted the ship's owners immediately. Most species already had FTL technology, Jake pointed out. We didn't. It was our first real chance to reach for the stars, and we took it, even knowing it might provoke retaliation. Especially knowing it might, Jake said. Humans don't like being dependent on others for their survival. We'd rather take the risk and control our own destiny. Zaratil was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Your species is more adaptable than I initially believed. You thought we were primitive, Jake said. It wasn't a question. I thought you were limited, she admitted. Young races typically are. They focus on immediate concerns rather than long-term strategy. But your response to my demands yesterday suggests a more sophisticated understanding of power dynamics. We've had good teachers, Jake said dryly. Every time someone's tried to push us around, we've learned something new about how the galaxy really works. Such as, Jake set down his tools and faced her directly. Such as the fact that respect isn't given freely out here. You have to earn it, usually by proving you're too dangerous to ignore and too useful to eliminate. And you believe humans have achieved this balance. Getting there, Jake said, slowly but surely. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from the bridge. Sarah's voice came over the intercom. Captain, we've got company. Valdorian ships, moving to intercept. Jake and Zaratil exchanged glances before hurrying to the bridge. The main screen showed 3 sleek Valdorian warships in a standard interdiction formation. Their elegant curves and gleaming hulls made the stellar wind look like a rust bucket by comparison. They're hailing us, Sarah reported. On screen, Jake ordered. The image that appeared showed a Valdorian male in military dress. His face was stern, his silver hair cropped short in a military style. Merchant vessel. This is Admiral Kethvar of the Imperial Fleet. You will prepare to be boarded for inspection. Jake looked at Zaratil, who had gone very still. Friend of yours? My brother, she said quietly. This complicates matters. Captain Morrison, the Admiral continued, you are harboring a fugitive from Imperial justice. Surrender Princess Zaratil immediately, and you will be allowed to continue on your way. Jake felt the familiar surge of anger. Another member of your family who likes making demands, I see. My brother believes he is protecting Imperial interests, Zaratil said. He does not understand the situation. What situation? Jake asked, but before she could answer, he opened a channel to the Admiral. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the merchant vessel Stellar Wind. Princess Zaratiel is a paying passenger aboard my ship. I don't know anything about her being a fugitive. Do not interfere in Imperial affairs, human, Admiral Kethvar replied coldly. My sister has violated Imperial law and must return to face judgment. What law? Jake asked. Zaratiel stepped forward, coming into view of the screen. Brother, you exceed your authority. I am not subject to military jurisdiction. You are when you steal Imperial property and flee the homeworld, Kethvar shot back. Return immediately, sister, or face the consequences. What did you steal? Jake asked quietly. Information, Zaratiel said. Evidence of corruption in the Imperial Council. My brother is part of a faction that believes such matters should be handled internally, quietly. And you disagree? I believe the truth should be exposed, regardless of who it embarrasses. Jake looked back at the screen, where Admiral Kethvar was clearly growing impatient. Admiral, I need to see some proof of these charges before I hand over passenger. You dare question Imperial authority? Kethvar's voice rose. Human, you are in no position to make demands. Actually, I am, Jake said. This is an independent merchant vessel in neutral space. Your authority doesn't extend here without proper documentation. Documentation? The Admiral seemed genuinely confused by the concept. Yeah, warrants, extradition orders, that kind of thing. Legal paperwork. Jake kept his voice deliberately casual. Oh wait, I forgot. The Valdorian Empire doesn't recognize other species' legal systems, does it? You just take what you want and expect everyone else to comply. How dare you? How dare I what? Jake interrupted. Expect you to follow the same laws that apply to everyone else? Here's a thought, Admiral. Maybe your sister ran because she knew she wouldn't get a fair hearing at home. Zaratiel looked at Jake with surprise. You would defend me? Even knowing the risks? I'm not defending you, Jake said. I'm defending the principle. If you did something wrong, prove it through proper channels. If not, then this is just family politics, and I don't get involved in family politics. On the screen, Admiral Kethvar's expression had shifted from anger to something more calculating. Captain Morrison, you seem to misunderstand your situation. 3 Imperial warships against 1 human cargo vessel. The outcome is not in doubt. No, it's not, Jake agreed. You'd win in a straight fight. But it wouldn't be a straight fight, would it? Before Kethvar could respond, Sarah spoke up. Captain, we're receiving multiple FDL signatures. Ships dropping out of hyperspace. The tactical display lit up as dozens of vessels appeared around the stellar wind. Jake smiled as he recognized the configurations. The Independent Traders Association had followed him, just as they had at the earlier confrontation. You see, Admiral, Jake said, that's the thing about threatening humans. Word gets around, and when it gets around that Imperial warships are stopping merchant vessels in neutral space, well, that tends to make a lot of people nervous. Admiral Kethvar's eyes widened as he took in the scope of the human fleet. This is unprecedented. You cannot mobilize an entire fleet for 1 passenger. We're not mobilizing for 1 passenger, Jake said. We're mobilizing for the principle that no one, not even the mighty Valdorian Empire, gets to stop our ships without proper legal justification. The Empire will remember this insult, Kethvar warned. Good, Jake replied. Make sure they remember it accurately. We're not looking for a fight, but we won't back down from one either. Your sister bought passage to Kepler Station. I intend to deliver her there, as contracted. Zaratiel stepped closer to the screen. Brother, withdraw your ships. This human speaks truth. You have no legal authority here. Zaratiel, you don't understand what you're risking, Kethvar said, his voice softening slightly. The Council is furious. If you don't return voluntarily, then I will face that when the time comes, she replied. But not here, not like this. For a long moment, the bridge was silent except for the hum of ship systems. Finally, Admiral Kethvar spoke. Captain Morrison, you have made a powerful enemy today. Maybe, Jake said, but I've also made it clear that humans don't intimidate easily. That's a lesson worth teaching. The transmission ended, and they watched as the Valdorian warships slowly withdrew. The human fleet maintained formation until the Imperial vessels jumped to hyperspace, then began to disperse. Why? Zaratiel asked quietly. Why risk so much for someone you barely know? Jay considered the question carefully. Because it wasn't really about you. he said finally. It was about whether humans get to determine their own fate out here, or whether we're just another species that the big empires push around at will. And you believe you've answered that question? Today I do, Jake said. Tomorrow? We'll see. As the stellar wind resumed course for Kepler Station, Jake couldn't help but wonder what kind of information Princess Zartiel was carrying, and whether he'd just made the situation better or infinitely worse. But that was a problem for another day. Right now, he had a passenger to deliver and a reputation to maintain. The galaxy was watching, and humanity was making sure it saw something worth remembering. Kepler Station hung in space like a massive wheel, its rotating sections glinting in the light of the system's twin stars. As one of the largest independent trade stations in the sector, it was neutral ground where species from across the galaxy came to conduct business. Jake had docked here dozens of times, but never with cargo quite as explosive as Princess Zartiel. Impressive, the princess said as they approached the station's docking bay. For human construction. We didn't build it, Jake admitted. Bought it from the Thessians about 20 years ago when they abandoned this sector. But we've made some improvements. Those improvements were visible as they drew closer. The station's original elegant architecture now bristled with defensive turrets, sensor arrays, and shield generators. What had once been a simple trading post was now a fortress that could hold its own against a small fleet. You fortified a civilian station? Zartiel asked. We learned that neutral ground only stays neutral if you can defend it, Jake explained. Too many species see undefended human assets as easy targets. The docking procedures went smoothly, and soon they were walking through the station's bustling corridors. Jake had to admit it was quite a sight. Humans, Valdorians, Zenthari, Kepler natives, and dozens of other species conducted business side by side in a controlled chaos of commerce and diplomacy. This is remarkable, Zartiel murmured as they passed a market area where a human merchant was haggling with a six-armed hegemony trader. Such diversity operating in harmony. Mostly harmony, Jake corrected. We still have our share of incidents. But credits talk louder than prejudice most of the time. They made their way to the station's administrative center, where Jake intended to complete the formal passenger transfer. But as they approached the main desk, a commotion erupted near the entrance. A squad of station security was trying to maintain order as angry voices rose from a crowd that had gathered. What's happening? Zartiel asked. Let's find out, Jake said, leading her toward the disturbance. At the center of the crowd stood a tall Valdorian in diplomatic robes, flanked by two guards. He was addressing the gathered beings in a voice that carried clearly across the atrium. Citizens of Kepler Station, the diplomat announced, I am Ambassador Veltar of the Valdorian Empire. We have received reports that this station is harboring a dangerous fugitive. We demand the immediate surrender of the criminal Zartiel. A murmur ran through the crowd. Jake felt Zartiel tense beside him. Who is this guy? Jake asked quietly. Veltar, she replied, her voice tight with anger. A political rival who serves my uncle's faction on the council. He must have known I would come here. The individual in question, Ambassador Veltar continued, has stolen sensitive imperial information and fled justice. Any being providing aid or shelter to this criminal will be considered an enemy of the Empire. Station Administrator Chun Wei, a middle-aged human woman Jake had known for years, stepped forward. Ambassador, with respect, this is an independent station operating under galactic trade law. We don't recognize imperial warrants without proper documentation and review. Documentation. Veltar's voice rose. The Valdorian Empire does not require documentation to retrieve its own citizens. On this station, everyone requires proper documentation, Administrator Chen replied firmly. Those are the rules that allow us to operate as neutral ground. Neutral ground that harbors criminals is not neutral, Veltar snapped. It is complicit. Jake had heard enough. He stepped forward, Zartiel beside him. Ambassador, he called out, his voice carrying clearly across the atrium. Captain Jake Morrison, Independent Traders Association. I brought Princess Zartiel here as a paying passenger. If you have charges to file them properly. The crowd turned to stare at them, and Jake heard the distinctive sound of weapons powering up as Veltar's guards noticed their target. But before they could react, something unexpected happened. Captain Morrison, A gruff voice spoke from the crowd. Jake turned to see Commander Marcus Torres, a retired Earth Navy officer who now ran security for several independent colonies. Is that the Zaratil? The princess who exposed the Centauri mining scandal. Murmurs of recognition rippled through the crowd. Jake looked at Zaratil in surprise. The what scandal? 3 months ago, Commander Torres explained loudly enough for everyone to hear. Someone leaked documents proving that Valdorian nobles were using slave labor in their mining operations. The leak came from inside the Imperial Palace. That's not relevant, Ambassador Veltar interrupted. Internal Imperial matters, internal. A new voice spoke up. This time, it was Dr. Sarah Kim, a human xenobiologist Jake recognized from previous station visits. Those mining operations were using kidnapped Kepler natives as forced labor. My research team documented dozens of missing persons reports that traced back to Valdorian mining ships. The crowd's mood was shifting, Jake realized. What had started as curiosity about a criminal fugitive was becoming something else entirely. The princess risked everything to expose those crimes, Dr. Kim continued. And now they want to silence her for it. Lies and propaganda, Veltar declared, but his voice lacked conviction. Are they? Zaratil stepped forward, her regal bearing commanding attention. Ambassador, why don't you tell these beings about the mining quotas that could only be met with unpaid labor? About the ships that disappeared near Kepler space? About the council members who profited while children died in the mines? You have no proof, Veltar began. Don't I? Zaratil held up a small data crystal. Everything is here. Financial records, shipping manifests, communication logs. All the proof anyone could need. The ambassador's face went pale. You cannot be allowed to spread such lies. They're not lies, Zaratil said simply. And that's what terrifies you. Jake watched the crowd's reaction with growing amazement. He'd expected fear, maybe even demands that Zaratil be handed over to avoid trouble. Instead, he saw anger, righteous anger directed at the Valdorian ambassador. So that's what this is really about, Administrator Chen said, her voice cutting through the noise. Not criminal charges. Political suppression. The Empire's internal affairs are not subject to outside judgment, Veltar said. But he was clearly losing control of the situation. Maybe not, Commander Torres stepped forward, but slavery is everyone's business, especially when it involves citizens of this sector. A chorus of agreement rose from the crowd. Jake realized that Zaratil had just transformed herself from fugitive to hero in the space of a few minutes. The beings gathered here represented dozens of species, but they all understood the threat of forced labor. Ambassador, Administrator Chen said formally, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave. Your diplomatic immunity doesn't extend to making threats on my station. This is not over, Veltar warned. The Empire will not forget this insult. Good, Jake said loudly. Make sure they remember that when decent beings see slavery, they don't stand by and let happen. That's a lesson the Empire needs to learn. As security escorted the ambassador and his guards away, the crowd began to disperse, but not before many beings approached Zaratil to express their support. Jake watched in amazement as merchants, travelers, and station workers, human and alien alike, offered assistance. How did you know they'd react that way? Jake asked her quietly. I didn't, Zaratil admitted, but I hoped. Slavery is one crime that transcends species boundaries. Even beings who hate each other can usually agree that forced labor is wrong. So what happens now? Now I complete my mission, she said, holding up the data crystal. This information needs to reach the Galactic Trade Council. Once it becomes public, the Empire will have to respond. And if they try to stop you? Zaratil looked around at the diverse crowd of beings who had just declared their support for her. Then, they'll have to deal with more than just one rebellious princess. Commander Torres approached them. Captain Morrison, Princess, I've been in contact with several independent Defense Force commanders. If you need escort to the Trade Council headquarters. That's generous, Jake said, but it's not generosity, Torres interrupted. It's necessity. If the Empire is willing to use slave labor, they'll escalate to other crimes. This needs to stop before it spreads. As they made arrangements for the next phase of their journey, Jake reflected on how much had changed since Zaratil had first threatened him in his cargo bay. What had started as a simple passenger transport had become something much larger, a stand against oppression that was drawing support from across the galaxy. "Captain," Zaratil said as they prepared to leave the station, "I owe you an apology. When I first demanded passage, I thought I was dealing with just another primitive species that could be easily intimidated. And now I understand why the Empire fears humanity," she said. "You don't just resist tyranny, you inspire others to resist it too. That's far more dangerous than any weapon." As the stellar wind departed Kepler Station with an escort of human ships, Jake couldn't help but smile. Princess Zaratil had thought she was challenging one stubborn cargo captain. Instead, she'd awakened something much larger, the human spirit of defiance that refused to let injustice go unopposed. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humans decided to take a stand. And Jake suspected the lesson would be one that empires everywhere would remember for a very long time. The journey to the Galactic Trade Council headquarters should have been routine. With an escort of 12 independent Defense Force ships, Jake felt confident they could handle any trouble. "You should have known better." "Captain," Sarah Chun called from the Bridges Sensor Station, "we've got incoming hyperspace signatures. Big ones." Jake's blood ran cold as the tactical display lit up. Emerging from hyperspace in a perfect formation were 6 Valdorian heavy cruisers, their massive bulk dwarfing even the escort ships. These weren't patrol vessels or diplomacy ships. These were warships designed for one purpose: destroying enemies of the Empire. "This is Admiral Kethvar," came the familiar voice over the communication channel. "Captain Morrison, you will surrender my sister immediately. This is your final warning." Princess Zaratil, who had been studying navigation charts at the rear of the bridge, looked up with grim determination. "He brought the 3rd battle group. My brother is not making empty threats this time. Can we outrun them?" Jake asked Sarah. "Not with those heavy cruisers," she replied. "They've got military-grade drives. They'll catch us before we can reach Council space." Commander Torres's voice crackled over the fleet communication channel. "All ships, this is Torres. Form defensive formation around the stellar wind. We're not backing down." "Jim, you've got 12 light escorts against 6 heavy cruisers," Jake said into his communicator. "The math doesn't work." "Maybe not," Torres replied, "but we've got something they don't expect, which is humans who are really, really angry about slavery." Before Jake could ask what he meant, his sensor display exploded with new contacts. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace all around them, dozens, then hundreds. But these weren't military vessels. They were cargo ships, passenger transports, mining vessels, and frontier fighters. They were human civilians who had somehow learned about the situation and come to help. "Sweet Mother of Earth," Sarah whispered. "It's half the independent merchant fleet." Admiral Kethvar's voice came over the channel again, but this time it carried a note of uncertainty. "What is the meaning of this?" "These are civilian vessels." A new voice answered, Captain Elena Vasquez, Jake's old friend from their Navy days. She now commanded a heavy freighter called New Brasilia. "Admiral, this is Captain Vasquez speaking for the assembled fleet. We're here to ensure safe passage for Princess Zaratil to the Trade Council. You cannot seriously expect civilian vessels to engage Imperial warships," Kethvar replied. "You're right," Elena said. "We can't match your firepower. But here's the thing about humans, Admiral. We don't always do what makes sense. Sometimes we do what's right." Jake watched in amazement as the civilian fleet began to move. They weren't forming attack formations. They were surrounding the Valdorian warships, creating a massive sphere of ships that would make it impossible for the cruisers to fire without hitting multiple civilian targets. "This is unprecedented." Admiral Kethvar sounded genuinely confused. "These beings are risking their lives for one fugitive." "She's not a fugitive," came another voice. Dr. Sarah Kim from Kepler Station, apparently commanding a research vessel that had joined the fleet. "She's a hero, and humans protect heroes." Zaratil moved to Jake's side, staring at the display in wonder. "They came," she whispered. "All these beings came to help someone they've never met." "Welcome to humanity," Jake said quietly. "We don't abandon people who fight against injustice." The standoff continued for several tense minutes. The Valdorian ships were vastly superior in firepower, but they were completely surrounded by hundreds of civilian vessels. Any attack would result in massive casualties among non-combatants, a a war crime that even the Empire couldn't easily justify. Finally, a new voice joined the communication channel. It was older, carrying the weight of authority. "This is Chancellor Mordek of the Galactic Trade Council. All vessels will stand down immediately." "Chancellor," Admiral Kethvar said, relief evident in his voice. "The Empire demands the immediate surrender of the fugitive Zaratil." "I'm afraid I can't accommodate that request, Admiral," the Chancellor replied smoothly. "Princess Zaratil has formally requested asylum with the Trade Council, pending a full hearing on her allegations against the Valdorian Empire." Jake felt Zaratil tense beside him. "You've already contacted them?" "I sent a message before we left Kepler Station," she explained. "I wasn't certain they would respond." "The Trade Council has no authority over Imperial citizens," Kethvar protested. "Actually, Admiral, we do," Chancellor Mordek said. "The Valdorian Empire is a signatory to the Galactic Commerce Accords, which include provisions for protection of whistleblowers who expose crimes affecting interstellar trade. Since the allegations involve forced labor and illegal mining operations, they fall under our jurisdiction." "This is political manipulation," Kethvar began. "This is the law," the Chancellor cut him off. "The same law your Empire agreed to when you joined the Trade Council. Princess Zaratil will be given safe passage to present her evidence." Jake could practically feel Admiral Kethvar's frustration through the communication channel. "And if the evidence is proven false, then she will face the consequences," the Chancellor said. "But the determination will be made by an impartial tribunal, not by Imperial military force. The Empire will not forget this interference." "I hope not," came an unexpected voice, Captain Elena again. "I hope the Empire remembers that when decent beings see injustice, they don't stand by quietly. That's how real civilization works." A chorus of agreement came from the assembled civilian fleet. Hundreds of voices from dozens of species, all united in support of one princess who had risked everything to expose the truth. Zaratil stepped forward and opened her own communication channel. "Brother, withdraw your ships. You have my word that I will submit to the proper legal process." "Zaratil," Kethvar's voice was heavy with emotion, "you don't understand what forces you've unleashed. The Council will never forgive this humiliation." "Then, perhaps it's time for the Council to change," she replied. "Or be changed." There was a long silence before Admiral Kethvar spoke again. "Captain Morrison." "Yes, Admiral?" "You have made an enemy of the most powerful empire in this sector." "I've made an enemy of tyrants," Jake corrected. "That's not the same thing. And as you can see, I'm not alone." The Admiral's final words were barely above a whisper. "No, you're not." The Valdorian ships slowly withdrew, jumping to hyperspace one by one. As they departed, the civilian fleet began to cheer, a sound that carried across every communication channel as hundreds of beings celebrated their peaceful victory. "Princess," Chancellor Mordek's voice returned to the channel. "Trade Council security ships are en route to provide escort for the remainder of your journey." "Thank you, Chancellor," Zaratil replied. "I have evidence that will shock the galaxy." "I hope so," the Chancellor said, "because what you've started here today will have consequences none of us can fully predict." As the civilian fleet began to disperse, many ships passing close to the stellar wind to offer personal messages of support, Jake reflected on what had just happened. A single threat made against a stubborn human cargo captain had somehow sparked a galaxy-wide movement against oppression. "Captain," Zaratil said quietly, "when I first threatened you, I thought I was dealing with just another primitive species. What do you think now?" She watched the fleet of ships that had risked everything to protect her, ships crewed by beings who had never met her, but believed in her cause. "I think your species may be the most dangerous force in the galaxy." "Because we're violent?" "No," she said softly, "because you inspire hope. And hope is the one thing that empires can never truly defeat." Jake smiled as the Trade Council escort ships arrived to take overprotection duties. "Princess, you haven't seen anything yet. Wait until you see what humans do when we really get motivated." As the stellar wind continued toward the Trade Council headquarters, now under official protection, Jake couldn't help but feel proud of his species. They might be young, they might be considered primitive by some, but when the chips were down, humans knew how to stand up for what was right. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threatened the wrong human. And Jake suspected the lesson would change everything. 6 months after Princess Zaratiel's testimony before the Galactic Trade Council, Jake Morrison sat in his favorite bar on Kepler Station, nursing a drink and watching the news feeds. The galaxy had changed dramatically since that day when an alien princess had threatened him in his cargo bay. Captain Morrison, a familiar melodic voice, spoke behind him. Jake turned to see Zaratiel approaching, though she looked different now. Gone were the elaborate royal robes, replaced by simple but elegant clothing more suited to her new role. Her silver hair was shorter, more practical, and there was a confidence in her bearing that hadn't been there before. "Princess," Jake said, standing to greet her. "Though I hear it's Ambassador now." "Ambassador Zaratiel, Special Envoy for Interspecies Justice," she said with a slight smile. "The Trade Council created the position after my testimony. It seems there's quite a demand for someone to investigate crimes that cross imperial boundaries." Jake gestured for her to join him at his table. "How's the new job?" "Challenging," she admitted, settling into the chair across from him. "The Valdorian Empire wasn't the only one using forced labor. We found similar operations run by the Zenthri Hegemony, the Kepler Corporate Alliance, and even some human colonial administrations." "But you're shutting them down?" "Slowly but surely," she said with satisfaction. "It helps that I have the backing of the Trade Council and the support of the Independent Defense Force. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're not fighting alone." Jake raised his glass in salute. To not fighting alone. They drank in comfortable silence for a moment before Zaratiel spoke again. "I wanted to thank you, Captain, not just for helping me reach the Trade Council, but for showing me what courage really looks like." "All I did was refuse to be bullied," Jake said. "You did much more than that," she insisted. "You showed me that sometimes the right choice is the dangerous choice. That standing up to power isn't about having superior strength. It's about having unshakable principles. Humans are stubborn that way," Jake agreed. "Yes, you are. And the galaxy is better for it." She paused, looking around the busy bar where humans, Valdorians, and dozens of other species mingled freely. "Do you know what the most remarkable thing about humans is?" "I'm sure you're going to tell me," Jake said with a grin. "You inspire other species to be better than they are." Before our encounter, I was content to work within the system, to change things slowly and quietly. But watching humans refuse to accept injustice taught me that sometimes gradual change isn't enough. And now I have teams investigating corruption across the sector. The Valdorian Empire has reformed its mining operations and compensated the families of forced laborers. 3 other empires have signed new anti-slavery accords, all because one human captain refused to be intimidated. Jake shook his head. "You give me too much credit. That response you saw, the fleet that came to help, that wasn't because of me. That's just how humans are. We look out for each other." "But you were the catalyst," Zaratiel said. "You turned a simple passenger transport into a galactic movement for justice. That's not something any species can do." "Maybe," Jake conceded. "But here's the thing about humans. We don't do it for glory or recognition. We do it because it needs to be done." Their conversation was interrupted by Jake's communicator beeping. He checked the message and frowned. "Excuse me, Ambassador. Looks like I've got another passenger request. Emergency transport to the Outer Rim. Dangerous?" "Probably," Jake said, standing up. The message is from someone claiming to be a Zenthri prince who's exposed corruption in the hegemony military. Says he needs immediate evacuation before his own people kill him. Zaratiel's eyes lit up with interest. "Prince Kextar? I've been trying to make contact with him for weeks. His evidence could bring down the entire hegemony war machine. Sounds like another passenger who's going to threaten me if I don't provide immediate transport," Jake said dryly. "Will you take him?" Jake finished his drink and headed for the door. Someone's got to teach these aliens that threatening humans doesn't work out the way they expect. "Captain Morrison," Zaratiel called after him. "Yeah. When you inevitably turn this into another galaxy-spanning incident that embarrasses multiple empires and inspires reform movements across dozens of worlds, try to keep the property damage to a minimum." Jake grinned. "No promises, Ambassador. No promises." As he made his way to the docking bay where the stellar wind waited, Jake reflected on how much his life had changed. 6 months ago, he'd been a simple cargo hauler trying to avoid trouble. Now, apparently, he was some kind of galactic freedom fighter who specialized in protecting whistleblowing aliens from their own governments. "Sarah," He called as he boarded his ship. Prep the ship for departure. We're picking up another passenger who's probably going to cause us more trouble than he's worth. What else is new? Sarah replied from the bridge. Let me guess. Another alien royal with stolen evidence and angry relatives? Zinthri Prince this time says the hegemony military is after him. Joy. Should I alert the ITA fleet to be ready for another rescue mission? Jake paused at the threshold of the bridge. Through the viewport, he could see Kepler Station's bustling docks, where species from across the galaxy conducted their business in relative peace. A peace that existed partly because humans had proven willing to fight for it. Yeah, he said finally. Better safe than sorry. And Sarah? Yes, Captain. Make sure you record everything. I have a feeling Prince Kekstar's story is going to be one for the history books. As the stellar wind prepared for departure, Jake couldn't help but smile. Somewhere in the galaxy, there was a Zinthri prince who thought he could threaten or intimidate a human cargo captain into providing transport. That prince had no idea what he was about to unleash. The galaxy had learned many things about humans over the past 6 months. They'd learned that humans didn't back down from threats, that they stood together against oppression, and that they had an annoying habit of turning simple transport jobs into galactic incidents. But perhaps the most important lesson was this. When you threatened one human, you threatened them all. And threatening humanity was a mistake that empires made only once. As they cleared the station and jumped to hyperspace, Jake wondered what new adventure awaited them. Whatever it was, he was ready. After all, he was human, and humans didn't know how to give up. The princess had been right about one thing. Humanity was indeed the most dangerous force in the galaxy. Not because they were violent, but because they refused to let injustice go unopposed. They inspired others to be brave, to stand up, to fight for what was right. And in a galaxy full of ancient empires and entrenched power structures, that kind of inspiration was the most revolutionary force of all. The stellar wind disappeared into hyperspace, carrying its crew toward another confrontation with tyranny, another chance to prove that no matter how powerful the oppressor, there would always be humans willing to stand in their way. And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, empires trembled at the thought of what those stubborn, idealistic humans might do next.